Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of Liam's Hockey. Coming at you here as we get set for another weekend. Jeez, it is warm out. Holy cow. Get your butts outside and enjoy this beautiful winter day. I intend to play a little hockey outdoors tomorrow. Get outside, see how it's going. But yeah, looking forward to that. And yeah, it's a little bit of a nip in the air, but it's not that bad. Get a little whiskey into you like I will in just a few minutes, and it'll warm up your insides and you'll be good to go. On the hockey world from last night here as we roll these out 2-3 times a week. Last night, Montreal Canadiens, Ottawa Senators, Toronto Maple Leafs all in action. And so conversely, so are three other Canadian teams. Canadians continued their rolling way. That was a very clinical performance last night. They were up 4-0, allowed a couple late, fluke by Lucic, but second one that went in there in the dying seconds, Carey won't be happy about, somehow got through him. He's trying to get his numbers back to average, and he's getting there. He's 5th or 6th in time played, I believe, so far by goaltender. He'll be up there in and around the lead. Not as much as Koskinen in Edmonton, it looks like, that's for sure. But he'll be up and around the lead. But his goals against average and his save percentage are, because of the 2 games where he allowed the 5 goals, have got it really skewed right now. He was really sharp last night in that first period. He made some big saves, and that's a couple games in a row where he's looked good and allowed 2 goals. So that's they're going to need him at the end of the day. Say what you want about the Canadians, and I'll say a little bit more. I erroneously put on Twitter that Suzuki did lead in ice time by forwards. I had erroneously said it was Paul Byron. They must have, when I first read it on NHL.com, the stats, they had Byron at 18 minutes. He actually was down just over 14. But the forwards are all together. Really an incredible phenomenon right now, the way they're rolling 4 lines. I mean, the variance between the guy who played the least, which I think was Corey Perry, or in and around that 4th line anyway, and Suzuki, who played a little over 17 minutes. It's a difference of 3 or 4 minutes. They're rolling the lines. They're pretty solid on the back end, and they got Carey back there. So undefeated in regulation yet. Habs are the Washington Capitals, the only 2 out of the 31 that can claim that. And here they go. You know, the Habs get another win. In terms of the Matthew Tkachuk update, he was pretty quiet last night. I know they had Shea Weber out against him a lot. I saw Shea threw a couple shots at him, just in the normal course of action, and not much response from Matthew. And then he ended up getting into it with Sherratt, and they had a little scrap. No damage done. Yeah, I give Sherratt the W, but it was pretty much a non-starter for a fight. Yeah, they did drop the gloves, and they went, and he got him, and he may give Matthew a little cut. He had to go off the ice for a few minutes, and he came back. I thought otherwise Matthew had a pretty solid game. He makes a lot of real heads-up smart plays. He is a good hockey player, and we'll see if the theatrics continue. The game did end on a little bit of a fractious note, but really Montreal's got, not that they've got fighters per se, but they've got 4 or 5 guys that I think will be good to go. And I would expect Calgary to play a little bit more of a physical style on Saturday and definitely try and take the lead. The Canadians have faced so little adversity here in the very early going. It will be interesting to see when that happens in, say, a third period. I mean, yeah, they had it game 1 against Toronto, right? That game was a ping-pong match. Montreal took a lead late, and Toronto still tied it up, which is what they did last night against Edmonton as well. I mean, in most cases today, if a team is tying up a game, not once but twice in a third period, you're probably going to find a way to get it to OT. But the Leafs came right back both times in the third period against Edmonton last night. And if the playoffs started today, the Oilers are out. They're 4 points out, in fact. Now, it's a little bit skewed, right? They've played against Montreal and Toronto, who are leading the division, and they haven't had their, what's turning out to be anyway in the early going here, sort of a free space on the bingo card game against Ottawa, and they've got a couple of those coming up here, so they're going to be must wins for the Oilers. The last thing you want to do is get 6 or 8 points out if you think you're going to challenge for a playoff spot where every single night they're 4-point games. Doesn't matter what division, it's the same all the way across. Who's ever playing? It's like Bruce Cassidy on our local radio station here this morning, TSN 1200, was being interviewed and talking about how he's just not, you're not really looking outside your division. You're not really looking even at the highlights. It's really, you wouldn't as a head coach typically anyway. There'll be other people doing that, your advanced scouts, things of that nature for down the road. If you're fortunate enough to win those first 2 rounds down the road in May, June, and you get beyond into the semifinals before you see anybody else from outside your division. So it really is a unique scenario, isn't it? And we'll just continue to hope and pray that the few flare-ups that there has been for COVID currently affecting Las Vegas as a team, that they'll be few and far between, and everybody will be able to get not only their games in, but the rescheduled games in, and we'll continue along the merry path here. Anyway, good on the Habs. Solid win. Right back at it tomorrow night. We'll see how it goes. Calgary's a good squad. Vancouver and Ottawa. So the Canucks make it 3 straight against the Senators. My message there that I delivered a couple of days ago was to try and tell Sens fans to relax. They're finishing last all but assuredly this year in this division. I think most Sens fans are okay with that. They have put in the last 2 nights, I think, the lineup that most Sens fans, when I say most, the majority, I believe, would say that's the lineup we'd probably go for. At the end of the day, they're not getting the goaltending right now. And where the heat is falling, and rightfully so, on this team right now, is the vets that have been brought in, that include Matt Murray, have not been delivering in any way, shape, or form. Now, you always wonder, when you get these guys that are moved off Stanley Cup winning teams. Now, in some cases, it's to be cap compliant, you just have to break up the squad. That's what Tampa basically has had to do. And a couple of their cast-offs, that's an unfair term really to call them that, but I mean, really for lack of a better term, a couple of guys they couldn't afford to keep or the most expendable. Let's put it that way. In Paquette and Coburn end up with the Senators, and, well, Paquette looks like he's hurt right now, I think, but just neither one have played well. You put them on Tampa where they're insulated, and it's just a totally different scenario. I go back to the John LeClair trade from Montreal to Philadelphia. He had back-to-back seasons, I think, of 44 and 45 points in and around that 1993 playoff where he was exceptional. He looked like he was on his way to becoming the next power forward in the NHL. And because of the way specifically he played in the 93 playoffs. And he rolls right into 93-94 and has another 40-45 point regular season. So they trade him. And he goes and they put him on a line with Eric Lindros. And it's spontaneous combustion on the score sheet. And he lit up Montreal big time. And he starts reeling off 50-goal seasons. Well, Montreal didn't have an Eric Lindros to play him with. So when Coburn and Paquette come to Ottawa, or Matt Murray now comes to Ottawa, even though they deemed him in Pittsburgh, at least Rutherford, I guess, did. He's no longer there. But they deemed him to be expendable. They've got Tristan Jarry as their number 1. They move him at 26. He's the guy who basically came in and took the job from Marc-Andre Fleury and wins those 2 Stanley Cups. I mean, if Murray doesn't come in against Ottawa in 2017, do they beat the Sens? Probably not. And the Sens go to the Stanley Cup final, for God's sake. That's just 4 years ago. So what the hell? He doesn't look square to the puck. It looks like he's losing his net. He looks small in the net. No rebound control. There's just anything and everything that's going wrong with him. And then Holberg, the lack of confidence that most of this team is playing with right now. And that's just not an NHL defense, no matter how you cut it. Some great guys there. Got a local guy, Eric Goodbranson. I know the family a little bit. To me, it was when Luke Richardson came in, a very similar scenario. Coming back home for that one last kick at the can. We see it here in Toronto, and we have for decades. And you're seeing it with Jason Spezza. He's had a little bit of a flare up here offensively here in the last couple of games and whatnot. I'll get there in a second. But in regards to the Sens, you're going to lose a lot this year. There's really no Band-Aid solution that's probably going to come in and really alleviate the problems that they're experiencing. Having said that, what I do think will, and I did say I thought they would beat Vancouver in one of the 3 games. I really did. And I think they've got an opportunity possibly on Sunday against Edmonton. They'll be there rested. Edmonton playing, well, who isn't? I mean, no one's really, the travel really is a the way the baseball style schedule is, and you set these things up. But the fact is, Edmonton is playing Toronto tomorrow night, and then they've got to play Ottawa on Sunday. So it is a little bit of an advantage. Take from it what you will for the Ottawa Senators. They're not losing out the rest of the season. They're going to get some W's, and they'll get them because they'll take that first period from 2 games ago against Vancouver, where they had 23 shots on net. They must have taken one away, right? Because when that period ended, they were at 24, which tied a team high for a period, and yet the next day it was 23-7. And which was one short. But still, they should have had 4 goals. They could have had 4 goals. Colin White could have had 2 goals himself in that first period. I feel he's played, do you not think, Sens fans? I think he's played better these last 2 games. He's just been absolutely crapped on, largely because of what he's been paid. And then conversely, you put him in the lineup and he hasn't been able to deliver anything. But what they're going to do, I think, is they'll take something. They'll probably catch somebody. Could be in Edmonton on Sunday, or somebody else. Any one of the other 6 teams. Could even be Montreal next Thursday. It could come any time. They're going to catch somebody on the downside. They're going to get a good lead, and they'll get a decent goaltending performance. Matt will rekindle some of his old form. Holberg will kick out BBs. And everybody will play well. Stutz will score a couple. They'll feed off that, and they'll get a W. But they're going to be few and far between. And it's just the reality of it. And I think everybody got a little excited. We all, the Sens fans hadn't played in 10 months. There was a bunch of teams, 24 teams, I guess, that got a chance to play in the bubble in August and September, and so even though some of those were gone very quickly, at least a bunch of teams got to play at least a best of 5, and then a bunch of other teams got to play at least a best of 7 or 2 rounds or 3, right, as in the case of Dallas and Tampa. Ottawa, like the other 6, did not get that chance. So everybody, you fever pitch. See guy Derek Stepan, okay, goes on the radio, says all the right things. Didn't look that bad in the bubble for Arizona. You think, you got good Branson, great big tough guy. You've got, looks like you're going to have some toughness. You got Austin Watson, you pick him up, good penalty killer, been a good role player. You just look like you got another year with Brady Tkachuk. You got Tom Chabot already signed, up and coming, burgeoning young defenseman, should be great. On paper, it didn't look that bad, and it's all come crashing down because. It's not just on paper. How it's on ice is that they do look that bad overall over 60 minutes. They should have got a win against Winnipeg 8 or 10 days ago, and they played Toronto very well. Not only the game they won, but the next game the Leafs were hard pressed to get by them, and here they are. They had a couple of moments against Vancouver that certainly give you an idea that collectively they know what to do. It's not like these guys don't know how to play hockey, but the breakdowns that are occurring are not from a lack of hockey sense. They have the hockey sense, but it's panic, pressure, and the inability to work as a cohesive unit right now because they're absolutely flustered out there with the lack of goaltending they're getting. Even if they have a good couple of shifts, somebody goes down, scores a weak one. Look, if you played, you know. That sucks the life right out of you. So they're fighting against, on top of everything else, they haven't been able to get a save to save their lives. And that really has been the downfall. So it's going to be a long year. They've got 1,000 prospects coming. And for Ottawa's sake, it will turn sooner rather than later. But sooner is going to be 12 months. And again, comments that I'm reading and hearing that I'll echo and say the same is that you're almost in the point now as a Senator Brass to start looking ahead as much as you can to think, okay, what pieces have I got to have in play for next fall? God willing, we have the season start when it's supposed to, and things are back to as close to normal as possible. If they are, meaning an October start for the season of 2021-22, then you're almost at the point, if not already, where you're starting to look at a potential lineup and changes, who maybe might come out of junior or NCAA, your prospects and whatnot, who can maybe get in. Like Brandstrom, we got to see in the lineup at some point in time, right? Zub's got to get shots here, and some guys need reps, and that's the biggest thing for the Senators. So it's going to be a long haul here. There's no magic pill. I think a lot of fans just felt it was going to be closer losses, and they wouldn't be looking this disheveled over the course of 60 minutes, and there would be a whole lot more of what it was in the first period 2 games ago against Vancouver than what we've seen for the far majority of action so far as Ottawa's played. Tough times, but really goaltending, defense, it's very, very basic right now why they're getting schooled. And because there's a lot of good things still in that lineup, but it's just being enveloped right now by an absolute umbrella of mediocrity. That's what's going on there. Toronto Maple Leafs are right now. They're looking good. They have played their last 2-3 games. Have been the best they've played so far this season. Now I'm going to jump off at this point here right now and say something, because it's human nature. I get it. I know the overwhelming majority of people watching this, however many do, could be 10, could be 1,000, I don't know, and it doesn't matter. The fact is, whoever is, you're probably a hardcore fan if you're watching me for 15 minutes on this. The fact is that the North Division, the Canadian Division, is probably the weakest division out of the 4. They're going, hold on a second, man. Hold on. Look at the Montreal Canadiens. They're your team. They're undefeated in regular season. Look how good they look. They're rolling 4 lines. You got Carey Price, blah, blah, blah. Toronto Maple Leafs. No. Folks, are any of you watching the other games on the other nights of the week? Believe me when I say this. I'm not saying that the Habs and the Leafs right now couldn't go in, just what we've seen very early here, couldn't go into those other divisions and make a great account of themselves and compete. But they would be by no means walking away in any of the other divisions. You don't understand. There's 5 or 6 other teams right now that would play the Canadiens or the Leafs right now on any night, or either best of 7 or a best of 5 or something, and quite likely beat them. So you want to say, what are the deficiencies? Why I would say that. Montreal have improved their defense in terms of size and toughness, but the mobility, in terms of being an absolute Stanley Cup threat, I'm still concerned about. I still see some deficiencies on that back end. What has been a real fantastic change for me to see is their passing. And they're making some great passes. They're making some great transition. Their transitional game. But who's it against? I mean, you're playing Edmonton with Koskinen, who's playing every second of every game. Last night you played Calgary. They got their backup in. You play Vancouver, who were 2-5 until they play the Ottawa Senators for 3 games. The Canucks, I picked to finish 6th in the North Division. They lost a lot in the offseason. They got some nice pieces, but I don't think they've got either the goaltending or the back end. And right now they've had a lot of injuries already. They've got some nice pieces up front. They're going to win some games, but I don't consider them a playoff team in the North. And Montreal's banked points against them as well. They beat them. They took 5 out of 6 points against them. The Toronto Maple Leafs is somewhat the same thing. Like the Leafs, as we know, even last year through 70 games. Look, they've got the high-powered quartet there, and they're off to a pretty good start right now so far. All playing pretty good. But who are they playing? You know, we'll get a better look here when Montreal play Toronto for both sides in the next couple of weeks when they hook up again. And everybody else will step up and win their games against them over the course of the 56 here. But right now they look like they're probably the 2 best in the North, and that should probably... I had the Habs at 3rd. I had Edmonton higher. Let's see what happens when they get a chance to go through the Sens, as we said. But the fact is that the North Division, in my opinion, when the season ended last year at 70 games, the Edmonton Oilers were the highest ranked team, Canadian team in the NHL, and they were 9th. I believe they were 9th overall. 9th or 10th overall. They didn't just hit a switch here, and all of a sudden Montreal and Toronto went to the... They're at the top of the NHL statistically, but that's because they're only playing these teams. They're not going into Boston. They're not going into Tampa. They're not going into Dallas. They're not going into Philadelphia. You know, you're not going into Vegas. I mean, have you watched those teams play, folks? They're pretty damn good. And I'd say, yeah, Montreal and Toronto look good, but consider the opposition. That's why I wrote on Twitter last night, bank the points. That's all of these wins are. Bank the points, because you know you're going to face adversity. And when you do, you want to be ready. And you want to hopefully have a couple of pints. A couple of points. That was on purpose. Can you tell? I'm not going to open this just yet. I got a couple more things to say. I want to say very quickly last night. Also, yeah, so I said good win on the Leafs. And we got a good weekend of hockey coming up. Also, in the NHL last night, Alexis Lafreniere got his first goal. I'm a big fan of this guy, what he did for Canada in the World Juniors two tourneys ago. Absolutely fell in love with that guy, as we all did as a country then. He scored a beauty goal last night. His first overall pick to score his first goal in overtime. And, you know, you would think, okay, that probably makes sense, really. Most guys aren't going to probably score their first in OT. And, of course, the draft choices in the NHL from 1963 to 1983 didn't have overtime as an opportunity to score a first goal in. Regular season overtime was continued again in 1983. So good on Lafreniere. He becomes the 4th New York Ranger to score his first goal ever in overtime. Because regular season overtime was in the NHL in the initial days from 1917 until they took it out in 42 because of the Second World War. So there were 3 other guys. Matt Zuccarello in 2011. Sergei Nemchimov, who was on that 94 Cup winner. I think I just said his last name wrong, but close enough. Ends in OV. And he was in 1991. And the first New York Ranger to score his first ever goal in the NHL in overtime was a man named Paul Thompson in 1926. Now, he played for the Rangers for a few years. I think he was there even when they won their cup in 28. But he ended up with the Chicago Blackhawks. Anyway, he also has another interesting anecdote. He's the first man ever to score on his brother in the National Hockey League. And I know almost none of you have probably heard of Paul Thompson, but his brother is Cecil Thompson. And he went by the nickname Tiny. And that's a pretty well-known name in a lot of hockey circles. There's a lot of people, I bet you, would be familiar with the name. You may not know nothing about his career, how he started with the Boston Bruins, and he was a spectacular goaltender in his day. So Paul scored on Tiny, and they were the first ever to do it. And the second brother combination to ever score on one another were the Smiths, right here from Ottawa. My dear friend, the late Brian Smith, murdered tragically in 1995 at CJOH, scored not 1, but 2 goals on his brother, Gary Suitcase Smith, in 1967. I think that's just a great, great stat. I remember talking to them both about that at length years ago. And people say, hey, what about Phil and Tony Esposito? Yeah, they're next. Phil and Tony would be next. Phil scored on Tony. He played 18 games against Tony in his career. 18. You know how many times he scored on him? 25. He filled the net. He filled the net on him. Holy lifting. Anyways, and then you had the Birones. You had the Birones. You had the Birone brothers. You had Marty and Nett, and I forget the brother's name. Is it Matthew? Anyway, they were the 4th. There's a few others. You got the Subans playing right now. The Lundqvists. Well, Henrik looks like he's done, but Joel played against his brother. There's 1 or 2 others, but they didn't score on each other. And so those are the 4. The only other thing I want to say, last night, Drew Doughty in a loss scored his 3rd goal, and he played over 32 minutes. The old dog has a little bit of gas left in the tank, so that was pretty cool. And that's pretty much it. Yeah, that's pretty much it. So our toast today, just got the news this morning. Oh my God, another double. Just got the news this morning that the Yorks matriarch. Mrs. York passed away. I don't know if it was just earlier today or probably yesterday. But most of us here in Ottawa, somebody made a mention to me, actually, it was my good friend Josh Batley. We were texting back and forth this morning. I'd already seen the news on Twitter, and I posted my condolences. And he said, you know, Josh, who's a pretty fair athlete, good hockey player himself, real estate guy right now, and a good friend of mine. And he said, you know, Liam, if you think about it, from an Ottawa perspective, the Yorks would be in the conversation as one of the most successful athletic families. And he's right. And if you're wondering, yes, this is the mother of former NHLer Jason York, who's on TV right now on Rogers, and there's 3 other sons, and including Jeff, who I first met in 1980. That's how far back I go, at least with some of the family, being in this case Jeff. And this is a family that's extremely well known. The dad died a few years ago. Josh telling me some stories about Jim. I only knew Jim very superficially. I met him 4 or 5 times. There's a ton of people in Ottawa that knew him and the mother very, very well, as Josh did. And he told me a good story. Anyway, leaving a rink years ago, and Jimmy York with the keys in the fist, getting ready to go out. Parents were going at it. I love stuff like that. So I'm toasting today, Mrs. York. God rest your soul. What a family you raised. Just a fantastic group of children. Proud to say I'm friends with some of them, and you've now joined your fantastic husband, the late Jim, and may God rest your soul. And here's to the York family. I toast your mother on her passing. G'day.